you a theory. I'm not speculating. I was there when it happened. I know it's real. Let's come to another very important thing in the Christian life, which also requires a decision. And many of you, I think, might not realize this. It's forgiving. A lot of people think that forgiving is an emotion. And my attitude is, well, I can't forgive so-and-so because I don't feel forgiving. You don't have to feel forgiving. You have to will forgiving. Forgiving another person is not an emotion. It's a decision. It doesn't affect your emotions. It may in due course, but it centers in your will. I used to know how to preach, to get people to come forward to the, quote, altar. And I would see them kneel there and cry a little and get a little bit emotional. I think that's wonderful. But I discovered that in most cases they didn't change the way they lived. And if another preacher came along 6 months later with a similar message, they'd come forward and have a little cry at the altar again. And I said to myself, what's the good of that? If it doesn't change the way they live, what's the use of it? See, I was appealing to their emotions, but it was their will that decided the way they were going to live. Forgiving is extremely important for every believer, because if you don't know how to forgive, you'll end up unforgiven. In Mark chapter 11, Jesus is speaking about prayer. And in verse 25 he says, whenever you stand praying, this relates to any situation in which we're praying. If you have anything against anyone, do what? Forgive him, that your Father in heaven may also forgive you your trespasses. You see, if we retain unforgiveness in our hearts, our prayers will be hindered. We will not get the answer to our prayer that we need. So Jesus said, whenever, at any time when you're praying, if you're conscious you have something against another person, don't go on praying. Stop. Put it right. Forgive them. He doesn't say wait till they come and ask you for forgiveness. That's not what decides it. It's your decision, not theirs, that matters. Forgive them if you have anything against anyone. Tell me what that leaves out. It leaves out nothing, and it leaves out no one. In other words, you cannot afford to pray with unforgiveness in your heart. And that's possibly a reason why some of you have been struggling with the fact that you don't seem to be getting your prayers answered. Maybe you've overlooked that simple condition. Don't pray with unforgiveness. Now Jesus said, forgive. It doesn't depend on what the other person does or does not do. It depends on you. You, by the grace of God, when the Holy Spirit prompts you, have the power to forgive. Again, it's just like repenting. Without the Holy Spirit, you may not be able to do it. So again, it's a vital moment when the Holy Spirit is prompting you. Now you remember, you still got something in your heart against that lady from 10 years back, the one who did or said such and such. And God says, I'm not going to move in answer to your prayers until you have forgiven. In the Lord's Prayer, which I'm sure most of us are familiar with, it says, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who've trespassed against us. So we are entitled to ask forgiveness from God in the same proportion that we forgive others. Actually, the Greek is more vivid. It says, forgive us our trespasses as we have forgiven those who trespass against us. The lesson is the same. Don't pray with unforgiveness. Even if you want to say the Lord's Prayer, make sure that you've forgiven everybody before you start. I have, I think, been able by the grace of God to help countless people by this simple understanding that forgiving is not an emotion. I've told people it's like this. And I maybe one category of persons that often are involved are wives who've been mistreated and maybe betrayed by their husbands. And so I say to such a wife, now listen, you have in your hand a stack of IOUs from your husband. I owe you love, I owe you care, I owe you support, I owe you respect, and so on. Now those are perfectly legal. They're valid IOUs, and you can hold on to them. But just bear in mind that up in heaven, God has a stack of IOUs in his hand from you to him. And God says, let's make a deal. You tear up your IOUs, and I'll tear up mine. But you hold on to yours, and I'll hold on to mine. Now, let's say that your husband owes you, in just figurative terms, 10,000 pounds or dollars or whatever you're thinking. That's a lot of money. But you owe God 10 million pounds. So you see, forgiving somebody isn't really being super spiritual. It's just enlightened self-interest. I mean, if you will not forgive 10,000 for the sake of being forgiven 10 million, you're not much of a business person. So that's it. I mean, you see, Jesus was so practical. Well, I was teaching on this once, a good many years ago now, and right at the end of my message, before I had time to do anything, a very smartly dressed young woman of about 30, I would guess, came right down the aisle, right up to me, and I thought, what is she going to do? Is she going to slap me in the face? And she just looked me in the eye, and she said, Mr. Prince, I just want to tell you that while you were preaching, I got rid of about $30,000 worth of IOUs. Turned round and walked out. I didn't have to counsel her, didn't have to pray with her. She got the message. So remember, forgiving is doing what? Tearing up the IOU.